Today's case is a great example of why it's so important to check in on your loved ones whenever you can. Those in Michael Shaver's life thought that they were doing just that. But in hindsight, they realized that they could have done more. They could have called him, heard his voice, checked in to truly see how he was doing. But years passed, and by the time his loved ones realized they hadn't heard his voice in a long time, it was far, far too late. Most of us are very busy adults who don't always have the time to call family members or check in as often as we would like, so it can be easy to let that kind of communication slip to the back burner. But truly, no matter who you are or how busy you are, try and take the time to talk to those who mean the most to you, even if it's just for a few minutes every couple weeks, because you never truly know what could be going on in their lives, and checking in on them could be exactly what they needed. But before we get into the case, I want to say a huge thank you to MD Hair for partnering with me on today's video. Everything you need comes within a single kit. I have their customized treatment serum, which supports hair growth right up at the scalp. It helps you achieve a healthier scalp, which is imperative for hair regrowth. Then I have a customized shampoo and conditioner, which is made with plant proteins to help protect my hair from environmental damage. Then they'll also send you customized hair wellness supplements, which are packed with more than 20 different active plant complexes to help healthy hair grow from the inside out. As you can all maybe tell, I'm someone who loves to dye my hair. I love to curl it and straighten it, and over time, that's definitely caused it to become more fragile and fall out more frequently, which definitely sucks for me because I also love having long hair. That is why I use MD Hair to keep my hair growing and keep it as long as possible. MD Hair is the world's first medical-grade hair growth treatment customized to your exact cause and type of hair loss. You take a quiz on their website and they do a scalp analysis from a picture you send them to customize each kit. You will get several different products with their own different effects and natural ingredients within each product. The other great thing about MD Hair is that they're backed by science. They are clinically proven, customized hair growth treatments developed by dermatologists. They are formulated with medical-grade ingredients and botanical formulas to deliver the best possible results. So, if you want to get your customized growth treatment that is specifically designed for your hair regrowth, make sure you head to the link in the description box below and use code RShannon70 to get 70% off your first month of customized products. Thank you again so much to MD Hair for partnering with me on today's video. With that being said, let's get into today's case. Laurie Shaver was married to her husband, Michael Shaver, and together they had 2 children. The two had been together for quite some time, meeting as teenagers in upstate New York before ultimately settling in a home in Clermont, Florida. Michael worked as an aircraft mechanic at one point. He was a pilot as well, but just before his death, he had been working as a ride mechanic at the Epcot Center in Disney World. By 2014, Michael had moved out of the family home due to issues within the marriage, but by 2015, he moved back in, seemingly in an attempt to try and work things out with his wife. By November 7th, 2015, Michael, Laurie, and their 2 children met up with Michael's coworker Frank and his wife at a tractor show. There, Frank noticed that while Michael was acting relatively normally, his wife, Laurie, seemed a bit standoffish and cold. The two clearly had some tension going on between them, so the two left the tractor show early and went home. The following day, Frank texted Michael asking him if everything was okay, but he got no response. Frank texted Michael once again on November 9th, asking again if things were okay. This time, Frank did get a response. Michael texted him saying that he was actually quitting his job at Epcot to focus on saving his marriage. So, by the time November 10th rolled around and Michael was scheduled to work, he didn't show up. He didn't call his boss or anyone else to notify them of his absence, which definitely was odd to those who worked with Michael. According to his boss and coworkers, Michael was a very responsible employee. He never missed a day of work without at least calling or texting someone to let them know. That following day, November 11th, once again, he failed to show up to work without letting anybody know. By November 12th, after not hearing from him again, Michael's boss texted him asking him what was going on. At that time, Michael finally responded saying that he was having issues at home and won't be returning to work anytime soon because he was in Georgia. He said to either fire him or he'll just quit. Of course, this was very unlike Michael to just walk out on work like this, not even telling anyone until they reached out to him. So, by November 13th, Frank actually went to the home where Michael and Laurie lived, hoping to see Michael so he can come check on him. But once he got there, Frank was met with Laurie, who told him that she and Michael had gotten into a fight over him apparently talking to another woman, so he up and left and went to Georgia. Frank noticed that Michael's car was still parked in the driveway and it actually seemed to have a flat tire, so he asked how he drove to Florida without his car. Laurie said that Michael's friend, Robert Mercado, picked him up and drove him there. At this time, Frank really didn't have anything else to go off of. He had no choice but to take Laurie at her word and just continue following up with Michael to make sure things were okay. For the days and weeks that followed, Frank, along with other friends of Michael's, texted him to see what was going on. Michael would sometimes respond to messages, and other times he would ignore them. At one point, Michael told Frank to just keep his personal tools because he wouldn't be picking them up for work. Then Robert, the friend and coworker who apparently drove Michael to Georgia, texted Michael to ask about Thanksgiving plans. Apparently, he had plans to go to the Shavers' home to celebrate Thanksgiving with them and a few other coworkers. But at first, he got no response. He texted Michael a few more times trying to confirm their plans until Michael finally responded, "Leave me alone, I'm working on my marriage and my family." Then by January of 2016, Michael's sister Christine reached out via Facebook. Still, it seems like Michael couldn't be bothered because he responded saying, "Everyone just needs to leave me alone just like they did my entire life." For the months that followed, various family members and friends continued reaching out to Michael over Facebook and text, all checking in with him to see how he was doing. But he usually didn't respond to these messages, and when he did, he either told everyone to leave him alone, or he said that he was traveling to different states, such as New York, California, and Georgia. He would say that he's taking a break from everything to work on his marriage. He even told one individual that he was off living in Afghanistan, and when that person asked him about his kids, he just stopped responding. Those close to Michael also reached out to Laurie, who had all sorts of different stories about where Michael was. She said that Michael left her and the children and was off somewhere starting a new life. She complained that she wasn't getting child support from him, that he just left his family high and dry. Other times, she told friends that Michael had actually been following her and stalking her, and she was afraid for her safety. She told her best friend at one point that she actually had to call the police on Michael after she caught him stalking her, and so the police took her cell phone and her vehicle to search for any tracking devices or software. Eventually, she then told another friend that she actually had been able to get Michael accountable for child support by law, but he still wasn't paying, so he was actually sent to jail for non-payment. Also around this time, starting in December of 2015, Laurie started selling off a bunch of Michael's belongings. She sold his tools that he used for work when he was an aircraft mechanic, as well as several of his firearms. She sold one man 9 different guns, as well as some ammo, reload equipment, and cleaning supplies. She tried selling his car and his tractor, and even put up the house for sale. Anytime people would come over and buy those items, Laurie told them that yes, they belonged to her husband, but said that he left months ago and didn't take anything with him, so she just assumed he wasn't coming back, so she had every right to start selling his stuff. However, all throughout this time, not a single person ever spoke to Michael over the phone or saw him in person. Anytime someone reached out to him, they either got no response or got a very odd response from Michael that didn't really sound like him, either telling them to leave him alone or telling them that he was off somewhere living this whole new life. But as years started to pass and no one was seeing Michael or hearing from him, those who knew him started to get more and more worried. Finally, by February of 2018, a friend of Michael's, Scott, realized that he hadn't seen Michael in over 2 years. Scott had actually grown up near Michael, so he was a friend of the family. He ended up reaching out to Michael's family, asking what was going on with him, and that's when he learned that no one else had physically seen or heard from Michael in years. Of course, this prompted Scott to go to Laurie, who once again had all sorts of stories to tell regarding Michael's whereabouts. She told Scott that Michael had left years ago in a black SUV, and she never heard from him again. He found out about the odd way he quit his job via text, and how he was texting friends and family members to leave him alone. All of this felt very odd to Scott. Then, Scott found out about a concrete slab that had been laid in Michael's backyard. Now, back in 2015, after Michael returned to the home to live with his family again, he started digging a pit in his backyard to turn it into a duck pond for his kids to enjoy. But he never got around to finishing it, and by March of 2016, Laurie started posting to Facebook about a new fire pit she built in that pit. Then, by February of 2017, she poured a large concrete slab near that fire pit to complete the work in her backyard. But when Scott saw that concrete slab in the backyard in 2018, he thought that it was odd. That, plus all of the other circumstances surrounding Michael's disappearance, were just too much to ignore. Scott and the rest of Michael's family all agreed that there was no way that Michael would ever pick up and leave his family to start a new life. It just wasn't like him. So by February 16th, 2018, Scott called the Lake County Police Department requesting a welfare check for Michael, specifically asking them to check out that concrete slab in the yard. When deputies arrived at the home to speak with Laurie, she said that they were separated and that Michael left the family and was staying in Georgia. She said that the last time he was at their home was in September of 2014 when he picked up his belongings after he had moved out. Then the last time she saw him was in 2015 when they had a DCFS hearing related to a domestic incident that happened the year prior. At that time, deputies asked Laurie to search around the property, which she allowed. She was very cooperative, answering any and all questions they had and allowing them to do whatever was needed to figure out what was going on. When searching the area, deputies made it to the backyard where the concrete slab was located. Immediately, the slab really stood out to them because they noticed that it actually had a dip in the middle. According to investigators, when a body is buried under concrete, as the body starts decomposing, the concrete will start to compress into the earth, causing a dip to happen. Knowing that they were doing a welfare check for someone who hasn't been seen or heard from in a very long time, the dip in the concrete really raised suspicions for investigators. They wondered if this slab could actually be a grave. At that time, investigators asked Laurie if they could bring a cadaver dog onto the property to sniff the yard, but Laurie said no and asked investigators to leave. So they left and started to look more into Michael's records to see if there was any proof that he had left and was living anywhere else. They found that Michael had no current driver's license in the state of Florida or any other state. Both his U.S. passport and his pilot's medical certificate had expired. There were a few transactions on his credit and debit cards, but every transaction since November of 2015 could be traced back to online orders placed under Laurie's name. His credit and debit cards were eventually overdrawn, at which time they were never used again. He had been sued by his credit card company for non-payment of these cards, but that lawsuit had been dismissed because the credit card company couldn't find him. Once again, after speaking with friends and family members of Michael's, they learned that not a single person besides Laurie had physically heard from him. Not only that, but the stories Laurie was telling everyone were not backed up with any evidence. Laurie had never requested child support from Michael. There were no police reports regarding any stalking incidents involving Michael, and he certainly had never been in jail for non-payment. His car had been repossessed because Laurie couldn't sell it without the title, which she didn't have. They found that Laurie never once tried to make contact with Michael after November 3rd, 2015, which was odd given that she somehow knew where he was after he left. And just given the fact that he was her husband and she had 2 kids with him, she likely would have tried calling him at least a couple times after he just up and left the family. Based on all of that information, investigators knew that this situation was suspicious, so Michael was officially entered into the system as a missing person. Upon starting their investigation, detectives continued talking to those within Michael and Laurie's circles and finding out any information they could. They found a lot, and I'm going to tell it to you in chronological order to hopefully avoid any confusion. First, they found that on September 4th, 2014, the two were involved in a domestic violence incident. When police were called to their residence, it was reported that the two got into a very heated argument which escalated into physical violence. Each of them had a different story of what happened, both blaming the other for running and grabbing Laurie's .38 revolver and brandishing it at the other. They both said that they had to wrestle the gun out of the other's hands. But in the end, Laurie was able to get the gun and ended up hitting Michael over the head with it, causing a laceration to his head. The gun was taken in for investigation, as was Michael's own personal gun, though it was not used in this incident as far as I could tell, and this second gun, Michael's gun, was returned to him the day following. At the time, though, it was determined that Michael was the main aggressor, so he was arrested for simple battery. It was after this in which he moved out of the home and the two separated. Michael ended up pleading guilty to his charges in exchange for a plea deal that allowed him to enter a 12-month intervention program, which he completed in 6 months. After he left the home and the two separated, each of them started dating other people. In November of 2014, Michael started seeing a woman he worked with at Disney, Kendall, while Laurie was also seeing someone else during that time. However, according to Kendall, all throughout her relationship with Michael, she was constantly harassed by Laurie. She said that even though Laurie was seeing other people, she was not cool with Michael doing the same. There were times in which Kendall heard Michael on the phone with Laurie, who told him that he would never see his kids again if he didn't do what she wanted. Then Laurie started sending Kendall numerous messages on Facebook, calling her all sorts of different insults, threatening to expose her to her family as a homewrecker, specifically naming her grandmother by name. And once, she even called Kendall's grandmother at 3 a.m. to harass her. In March of 2015, Michael called Kendall and told her to park in a different parking lot than where she normally did at work because Laurie was on her way to Disney with a gun. Then, in April, Laurie called Disney HR and sent them photos from Kendall's Facebook to try and report her. Then, once Kendall blocked her, she started making a bunch of other Facebook accounts and started sending requests to her over and over and over again. It got to the point that anytime Michael would stay over at Kendall's place after work, he would first go to his own place to make sure he wasn't being followed. Finally, by May of that year, Kendall broke up with Michael because she just couldn't handle the harassment anymore. She was afraid that she would lose her job if Laurie kept making complaints, and of course, she feared for her safety. After this relationship ended, as I stated, at some point in 2015, Michael returned to the home with Laurie to try and patch things up with their relationship. Then, according to one friend and coworker, Corey, in July or August of 2015, Michael showed up to work with bruises all over his face, chest, and arms. Michael told Corey that Laurie had become irate and blew up about something, though he didn't say exactly what, and started punching Michael all over. Corey asked why he didn't at least defend himself from the attack, and Michael said that it just wasn't worth it. According to Corey, this wasn't the first time that Michael told him about Laurie blowing up and being physical towards him, though this did seem to be the worst of it. Then, as we know, by November of 2015, he stopped all contact with friends, family, and coworkers. Well, turns out that in September of 2015, Laurie actually started a new relationship with Jeremy Townsend, telling him that she left her husband. Jeremy was also married at that time, but he apparently told Laurie that he too was leaving his wife. The two seemed to have a pretty normal relationship until February of 2016, when it seemed that Laurie found out that Jeremy was still with his wife. That month, Jeremy's wife, Vanessa, started receiving Facebook messages from Michael's account. Vanessa didn't actually see the Facebook messages at first, though, until April, when she received a flower delivery at work with a note that read, "Roses are red, violets are blue. My wife is a whore, and your husband is too. Sorry about this. Check your Facebook messages. We need to talk, Mike." This, of course, prompted her to check her Facebook messages, where she found messages from Michael's account saying that he had installed a spy app on Laurie's phone and found out that she had been texting, calling, and sending explicit photos back and forth with Jeremy. He then sent photos to Vanessa as proof of his wife's affair with her husband, with hopes that she would leave her husband because he was cheating on her. Him and Vanessa chatted back and forth for a bit, and she alluded that she wasn't going to be leaving her husband. To that, Michael responded that he thought Laurie could be pregnant by Jeremy. Michael then told Vanessa that he knows a good divorce attorney. After these conversations with Michael's profile, Vanessa confronted Jeremy about the affair, which he admitted to. That same month, in April, during one of Jeremy and Laurie's hookups, Laurie showed Jeremy that she had gotten a tattoo of his nickname J in a heart over her vagina. This made Jeremy realize that she was a lot more serious about the affair than he was. He said that he was just in it for the sex, while clearly Laurie wanted a lot more. This, along with him being confronted by his wife, prompted him to end the affair with Laurie and start working towards patching things up with his wife. According to text messages found between Jeremy and Laurie between the dates of February 23rd through the 26th, Laurie started confronting Jeremy via text, asking why he's still wearing his wedding ring, asking why he's not moving forward with the divorce, and asking if he was still in love with his wife. The first time that Michael's profile reached out to Vanessa about the affair was February 25th. They then found that Vanessa had received text messages from someone claiming to be Michael, but the phone number used was not Michael's known number. It was a number that had only been active for 10 days, and Laurie's name was listed under the account. Then it was found that the flowers that were sent to Vanessa at her work were purchased with Laurie's checking account, although the name of the order was Mike Shaver. It was stated that on the day that the flowers were delivered, Michael's Facebook account sent Vanessa a message stating that he's excited for her to receive the special delivery. This indicates that whoever sent those flowers was also the person messaging Vanessa from Michael's Facebook account. Of course, investigators believe that Laurie is behind the flowers and the Facebook messages. Clearly, Laurie was trying to pose as Michael to get Vanessa to leave her husband so that she could have Jeremy all to herself, but that totally backfired and only caused Jeremy to leave her and patch things up with his wife, leaving her high and dry, just like she said Michael did. But her single life didn't last for long, because by early 2016, Laurie was in a new relationship with Travis Filmer. She told Travis that she had been married, but her divorce was finalized. The two went on to get married in a small ceremony, which took place in her backyard. They then got a joint bank account and did everything else a married couple would do. Of course, after finding out that Laurie was married to a new man, police questioned him about his relationship to Laurie. According to Travis, nothing all that crazy happened, unlike what we heard from her relationship with Jeremy. However, she had made a few concerning statements to Travis, one of which was when she was talking about Michael, saying, "It's not that he's missing. He's no longer walking this earth." Laurie went on to tell him that something bad happened and there was a body on the property. We don't know exactly the context for these conversations. We just know that it was mentioned that that was said at one point. He then got talking about that concrete slab in the backyard, which he actually helped to lay. As I stated earlier, it's believed that the fire pit was initially constructed in March of 2016. According to Travis, by the summer of that year, he and Laurie had rented a cement mixer from Home Depot. They used that to mix 42 bags of concrete, which they poured into a hole on the property, which had already been dug, as I stated earlier. Travis did say that it was odd because the hole was only 3 to 4 feet deep, but there was a mound of dirt on another area of the property that looked to be from a hole that was much deeper than that. Either way, by February of 2017, Laurie posted to Facebook a photo of the completed concrete slab. By this point, we can see that not only was the relationship between Michael and Laurie tumultuous, but right after the time in which Michael was last seen, she allegedly started using his accounts to reach out to people, including the wife of the man she was trying to date. Based on everything we've discussed up to this point, by March 9th, 2018, officers were able to obtain and execute a search warrant at the home of Laurie Shaver. They brought cadaver dogs as well as ground-penetrating radar equipment to search the yard. They quickly focused their efforts on that concrete slab, bringing in heavy equipment to carefully and methodically break apart that fire pit as well as the surrounding concrete. This took several hours to the point that it got dark and officers decided that they needed to take a break until the following day. By March 10th, they continued digging until they came into contact with a blue tarp located about 3 feet beneath that concrete slab. Upon removing that tarp, they discovered a human skeleton. The body had been wrapped tightly in ratchet straps and a fitted bedsheet. Once those items were removed, it was found that the body had been wearing socks, shorts, and underwear. Of course, these remains were sent off to the medical examiner for examination. At the time of this discovery, Michael Shaver's father had arrived to the family home. He found out about the excavation starting the prior day, so he made his way to Florida from Georgia to find out the status of the investigation. At that time, he gave investigators a sample of his DNA, which was then compared to the skeleton found in that grave. And after completion of that DNA testing, it was confirmed that the body found in that grave was a familial match, meaning that he was, in fact, Michael Shaver. Along with testing the DNA, of course, the medical examiner worked to determine a cause of death, which became apparent very quickly. There was a single .38 caliber projectile lodged in Michael's skull, indicating that his cause of death was the result of a single gunshot wound to the back of his head. There was no evidence of any further injury. No further gunshot wounds were found anywhere else on his body. Based on the size of the projectile found in Michael's skull, he could have been shot with a .38 caliber revolver, a .380 caliber pistol, or even a 9mm pistol due to how similar in size the projectiles from each of those guns are. As I stated earlier, Laurie Shaver did own a .38 caliber revolver. It was found that after Michael's death by October of 2017, Laurie had sold that revolver to her neighbor, Robert, who turned it over to the police after discovering what happened to Michael. The gun was then compared to the projectile found in his skull, but it seemed that the results were inconclusive. The projectiles from this gun cannot be excluded or included as the gun used to kill Michael. However, based on everything that we've discussed up to this point, it seems pretty obvious that Laurie has to be the one responsible. Michael was last known to be seen with Laurie before returning to the property where they both lived. Just days after he was last seen, Laurie lied to Michael's friend Scott about him going to Georgia. He said that a friend Robert drove him there, but Robert denies having done so. She continued lying to friends and family of hers and Michael's, coming up with all sorts of stories to explain his absence. During that time, she used his Facebook account and bank account for varying reasons. It seemed that she most likely killed him, then placed him in that hole that Michael had previously dug to make that pond. She then covered him in sheets and a tarp before burying his body with the dirt. Then he remained in that grave while Laurie went about her life dating different men until she built that fireplace and got her new husband to help pour concrete over the grave of her ex-husband. As you can imagine, everything that was discovered in this investigation took a very long time. I know I spelled it out to you over less than a half hour, but it actually took over a year to finally bring charges against Laurie. But finally, by September 17th, 2020, Laurie was finally arrested and charged with second-degree murder, domestic violence, and accessory after the fact. At her bail hearing, she actually did post bond, which was set at $50,000, so she returned back to her home with her children. Then, just after Laurie's arrest, a shocking discovery was made. Laurie's daughter, who was about 12 at the time but would have been 7 at the time of the murder, came forward to investigators and told them that she was actually the one who shot and killed her father, and she was ready to testify to that. Of course, her statements were taken by the defense and prosecution, and over the course of the investigation, the story changed a few times. But by the time trial started, she and Laurie had their final version of the story, which I will get into in just a minute. Finally, after years and years of waiting, wanting answers, and a painstakingly long investigation, the trial for Michael's murder started in September of 2024. The prosecution laid out everything I've discussed up to this point, arguing that after years and years of a tumultuous, toxic relationship, Laurie and Michael got into one final fight that ended in her grabbing the gun and shooting him in the head. Then she disposed of his body in that hole in the backyard, burying it there before eventually covering him in concrete alongside that fire pit. Then, for the months and years that followed, she did everything she could to pretend he was still alive. It seemed like she didn't know exactly who he worked with or who his boss was or who his friends were, so she couldn't reach out to anyone at first to quit his job. But when his boss or coworker would text him, that is when she told them that Michael was quitting and focusing on his family because obviously that is the person to reach out to. Then she went on his Facebook, occasionally adding photos and updating his status, doing so until around January of 2018. She replied back to Facebook messages, used his bank card to make random purchases, and lied to friends and family members about him. She said that he left his family and wouldn't pay child support. She then claimed that he was stalking and harassing her. All these things to make him look as nasty as possible, all after she knew he was already dead at her hands. Then she even used his Facebook profile to try and get her new man to break up with his wife for her, which, as we heard earlier, totally backfired. But finally, after years of not seeing Michael face to face, a family friend finally decided that enough was enough and called Laurie out. He got police involved, who finally uncovered what Laurie had been hiding for so many years. On the other hand, the defense argued a totally different version of events. As I stated earlier, Laurie's daughter, Isabel, came forward to testify about what she said happened. At the time of the trial, she was 15, but at the time of the shooting, she was only 7. She did end up testifying at trial, and again, her story changed multiple times, but the story she ended up sticking with is as follows. She claimed that her home was filled with constant domestic violence towards Laurie at the hands of her father, Michael. On that day, back in 2015, she was with her mom and Michael in the home when a fight broke out between the two of them, and Michael started beating on Laurie. He starts screaming at her, "I'll kill you." So she heard a lot of commotion, some banging, before hearing Laurie screaming, "Leave me alone, leave me alone." This prompted her to walk into the room her parents were in, where she saw Michael kicking her on the ground before he sat in a chair with his foot on Laurie's head as she's pinned to the ground and gasping as Michael is continuing in his threats to kill her. In desperation, the then 7-year-old girl runs away and grabs a gun before firing a shot off, believing that she shot Michael in the back of the head. But almost simultaneously as that was happening, Laurie's then boyfriend, Jeremy, walked in as well. He also saw what was going on, with Laurie still on the ground under Michael's foot. As Jeremy walked in, he grabbed his own gun, then shot Michael. After Michael was down, Jeremy yells to Laurie, telling her to get the kids and get out. He said that he'll take care of this, but if anyone says anything about this, he'll kill Laurie too. She went on to say that she was like a deer in headlights, just going into autopilot, grabbing her kids and taking them to school like routine. Laurie was so numb in that moment that she couldn't speak, and neither could her kids. After Jeremy shot and killed Michael, he dumped his body in the hole on the property, unbeknownst to Laurie. When she returned, she knew that Jeremy must have done something with the body, but she didn't know exactly what. After all that happened, she immediately broke it off with Jeremy, saying that she no longer wanted to be with him. So she broke it off with him, not the other way around. She was so scared that she maintained her silence for the years that followed, but she wasn't too scared to break up with him.
Now, he spins you around and you're in the chair, I take it?
I'm in his lap. He's holding me there.
Okay.
And then he pushed me to the ground.
Okay. As he pushes you to the ground, does he do anything?
After he pushed me to the ground, he was kicking me in the stomach.
Okay. Presuming you were pregnant or something?
Yeah, and I had already told him I had the abortion, and I was screaming at that point.
Okay. Is he making any threats to do any harm to you, any serious bodily harm?
Yeah, I mean, he said not this time. He said I was not getting away. The next thing I see is I can't even say that I've seen her. I more or less heard it, and then I think I seen her.
When you say her, who are you referring to?
Isabel.
Isabel? What's Isabel do?
She had fired a gunshot.
Okay.
The next thing I recall is seeing Jeremy, and hearing the gunshot essentially at the same time.
When Jeremy said, "I'll take care of this," did you have any reason to believe that that body was on your property?
No, never. There's no way he could have. I wasn't gone that long where he could have. Finding out the dimension? No. Mm-mm.
Of course, police questioned Jeremy about this, and he denied that it ever happened. In fact, he denied ever even meeting Michael or having any interactions with him while he was alive. I also want to note that according to the medical examiner, Michael was only shot one time to the head. If you believe the story that Isabel and Laurie are telling, then you have to wonder where the second bullet went. Even if Isabel missed her shot to her father, there would have been a bullet somewhere in the home. There would have been damage either to the wall behind him or the furniture or whatever the bullet went into. I don't know how extensive of a search was done on the home if, again, the shot was missed and went into a wall. You could also argue that the bullet might have gone into soft tissue, which was decomposed by the time he was found. But the excavation done to his burial site was very tedious, and if it had been lodged in, let's say, his abdomen, the bullet would have been found among the other items with his body. But within this entire thing, no additional bullets were ever found. Then you have to explain why Laurie would go on her husband's accounts and pretend to be him for so long if she truly wasn't the one who caused his death, especially if he was using Michael's account to talk to Jeremy's wife. You'd think there'd be a chance that Vanessa would tell Jeremy where she was getting the information about the affair from. Then obviously that would put a huge red flag for Jeremy if he knew that the man messaging his wife was actually dead because he shot him. He would know that Laurie was the one talking to his wife, exposing their relationship. If Laurie truly was scared of Jeremy, I just don't believe she would have done all that. Because again, she said that she broke it off with him, so why would she want to expose the relationship so bad? That doesn't make any sense. Everything that I've discussed up to this point was presented at trial. After hearing all of the evidence from both sides, the prosecution and defense each made their closing arguments, and the jury was off for deliberations. They deliberated for less than 4 hours before coming back with their verdict. The jury did not believe Laurie and Isabel's crazy story, and they found her guilty on all charges.
In the Circuit Court of the 5th Judicial Circuit of the State of Florida in and Fort Lake County, the State of Florida versus Laurie Shaver, case number 2020 CF 2361. Verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the charge, the defendant is guilty of second-degree murder. Was the defendant in actual possession of a firearm? Yes. Did the defendant discharge a firearm? Yes. Did the discharge cause great bodily harm? Yes.
Then, at her sentencing hearing, she was handed life behind bars for the murder of her husband.
Your Honor, Laurie Shaver has demonstrated multiple times her lack of remorse or resentment pertaining to the crimes she has committed. Laurie has willingly and without one single ounce of guilt damaged her children mentally by influencing them through instruction, uttering false statements since she murdered Michael in a feeble attempt to mask her crimes. Laurie assumed Michael's online identity, posing as Michael to myself, his other friends, and family to gain additional privilege of prolonged freedom, lengthening the time before she was able to be held accountable for her crimes. Ms. Shaver is quite possibly the most manipulative defendant I have ever had charged with murder, and the extent that she went to cover her tracks deserved the harshest penalty, and I ask for life in prison on this case.
Laurie Shaver Filmer, in case number 2020 CF 2361, having been found guilty by a jury of your peers of the offense of murder in the second degree with a firearm, and having been adjudicated guilty of the offense of murder in the second degree with a firearm, the court hereby sentences you to a term of life in the Florida Department of Corrections.
And that is where the case ends. This one was definitely a wild one from start to finish. It's unbelievable that in this day and age, someone can go missing for years before anyone realizes. I'm not blaming his family by any means, because they were receiving Facebook messages and texts and his social media was being updated. But it does break my heart just a little bit that someone can go so long without hearing their loved one's voice and not raise more of an alarm. Of course, his family is completely devastated, and I'm sure they wish they would have recognized what was going on sooner, but in hindsight, there really is nothing they could have done. They also have adamantly denied Michael being an abuser. They say that Laurie was the one who abused Michael and that he's just an innocent victim in all of this. Of course, we truly don't know who to believe, because obviously Michael's family isn't going to believe that he could be abusive, but at the same time, Michael isn't alive to defend himself, so I don't want to say either way. However, I do lean more towards Laurie being the abuser based on what we know about this case. I also do believe that the jury got this one right. I think that Laurie did shoot her husband for one reason or another. I think she's shown herself to be crazy and unstable, clearly unable to handle her emotions. Maybe Isabel was a witness to this, or maybe she really just believed in her mom's innocence, so she went along with saying that she shot her father. But in reality, I don't think she did. I don't think she took any part in this. I think this was a story they put together to make it seem like Laurie was less culpable, especially once they dragged Jeremy into it. By the way, I totally think they messed up by adding the whole thing of "I'll kill you if you tell anyone." Why in the hell would Jeremy threaten that when he only shot this man to protect his woman? Why would Laurie be afraid of Jeremy for shooting Michael when Isabel admittedly also shot him that day? That story made no sense, and if they had just thought it through a little more, they could have made it a little bit more believable, but I think that they felt they needed a reason for why they didn't come forward, so that was the only thing that made sense, so that's what they went with. But either way, that's what I think, and now I want to know what you all think. Do you believe Laurie's story? Do you think Isabel shot her father to protect her mother? Do you think Michael was abusive, or do you think Laurie was the abuser who lost her temper and shot her husband? Let's discuss this and any other thoughts you have in the comments below. If you liked this video, please make sure to go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to turn that notification bell on so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Make sure to follow my Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. All will be linked down below. And if you have any case suggestions, please make sure to fill out the Google form, which will be listed down below. With that, I hope you guys have an amazing week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.